Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome. We are now starting the Nigerian Experience Operating GeneXpert in Challenging Settings webinar. I am the moderator, Jerod Scholten, and I will give a brief introduction. On the program, we have as the keynote speaker, Ms. Prisca Ajiboye. She's the director for 10 years now of the Cepheid Authorized Service Provision Project in Nigeria. And we also hope to hear from Dr. Emeka Elom at the end, who is the Director of Medical Laboratory Services. We ask you that you keep your computers on mute. At the end, we will have opportunities for some discussion. And at that point, you can unmute when we call upon you. And you can also chat in the box if you have questions or comments. We also will have 3 different polls that will ask you questions, and we will summarize the results from those polls. And I think I will start. So Nigeria in a few numbers. Nigeria is a huge country. It has over 200 million people. It has the largest population in Africa, surpassing South Africa. It's a high-burden TB, TB-HIV, and DRTB country as defined by WHO. Incidence rate is estimated to be 219 per 100,000 inhabitants, which is high. And that translates into 500,000 people estimated to have TB disease in 2022. Treatment coverage, which used to be called TB case detection, has gone up from approximately 20% to nearly 70% in a very relatively short period of time. And I will go into that in more detail in the next slide. This is partially attributed to access to near point of care WHO recommended molecular rapid diagnostic test. HIV positive TB incidence is 13 per 100,000 inhabitants, which translates into 27,000 people with TB HIV in 2022 estimated. And DRTB is 5.6 per 100,000 inhabitants, which translates into 12,000 people diagnosed in 1 year in 2022. Nigeria has 36 states, including the capital, and it has 774 local government areas, or LGAs they're called, which are equivalent to districts in other countries. It's a huge country, also in terms of landmass and in terms of diversity, in terms of different people, in terms of geography and a lot of factors, but we will go into how it affects service provision as well. So the increase of treatment coverage is demonstrated by this black line, new and relapsed TB cases notified, and the green line is rather constant, as that's what WHO estimates to the TB incidence to be per 100,000. As you can see, expert MTB RIP was introduced in 2011, and it was going up slightly, and then expert RIP was endorsed as the primary diagnostic in Nigeria in 2016, and then it starts to go up more. And then Ultra was introduced in 2019. And in addition to that, TB testing was ramped up. So there is a study about best practices to really understand what's going on, an evaluation in Nigeria to see how this happened so quickly. And it's multifactorial, they think, but they certainly think that because testing was ramped up, the private sector was engaged, community advocacy and education were enabled. All those things contributed to this, but also the availability of a more sensitive test and high volume of testing were attributed to this increased treatment coverage. So KNCV Tuberculosis Foundation has been working in Nigeria for 22 years in partnerships with the National TB Program and other programs such as the National AIDS Program. And it started this support in the 2000s to support the USAID TB CTA TB flagship projects. We had 3 of those. And also in 2014, we supported early implementation of GeneXpert for the Nigeria National Agency for Control of AIDS, or NACA, which was funded by the Global Fund. And we introduced 180 GeneXpert instruments into the country at that time. A decade ago, in July 2014, KNCV was announced as a Cepheid high-burden disease country authorized service provider to do the following: to improve the use of GeneXpert technology with educational efforts, and to reduce instrument downtimes. And some key deliverables were we interface regularly with over 1,150 users. We expanded the super user network, which is a pool of people all over the country that have been trained and they have expertise to do work along with the team that Prisca leads. So that nearly doubled from what it was in 2016. We have specific educational programs to introduce the various assays, including Ultra, but they also introduced other non-TB tests, including, for instance, viral load, hepatitis, COVID, and various others. Over 10 years, thousands of preventive maintenances and modular replacements occurred, and a shared responsibility was adopted by stakeholders within the country to acknowledge that everyone has a part to make sure that the network is up and running. As you can see on the right side, it's a timeline that we started working in 2002 in the country. 2014, we introduced 94 GeneXperts. By 2024, we went from 3 staff to 13 staff, and we went all the way up to 546 GeneXperts, and we just had our 10-year anniversary for this project. I wanted to point out that at the beginning of this project, only GeneXpert was the only WHO recommended rapid diagnostic in the country. But since then, WHO has endorsed TB Lamp and TrueNet, and those have been introduced to a lesser extent so far in the country, with GeneXpert having 70% of the molecular diagnostic coverage, followed by TB Lamp, which is 25%, and TrueNet is 5%. So I will now introduce Dr. Prisca Ajiboye to give her keynote talk.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Dr. Jerod, for the introduction and for introducing me. My name is Prisca Ajiboye, and I will be talking about the Nigerian experience in operating GeneXpert in challenging settings. Next slide, please. What does the diagnostic network in Nigeria look like? We have that access to testing using other diagnostic tools or sample transport is available. This is to say that in places where you do not have the GeneXpert machine, you actually have sample transport available to move the samples that are generated in that location to other local government areas where you can find the GeneXpert or find any other WRDs, that's molecular WHO recommended diagnostic available. Just like Dr. Jerod said earlier, we have the TB lamp and we also have the TrueNat. Diagnostic network optimization was conducted in 2022, and it shows that integration with multiple stakeholders is most sustainable with shared costs. If you look at it, that what we pay on warranties as a country will be the same, whether you use the HIV test or you use hepatitis viral load or you use any of the over 30 range of tests menus that is available on the GeneXpert platform. As of today, we have 546 GeneXpert instruments installed across 317 local government areas. You will know that in Nigeria, the local government areas are the third arm of government. So this is the smallest unit of Nigeria as a portion. We have 2,531 modules, of which 535 are GX4s, and we have GX16s, 11 in number. Why expert integration? We look at it that you have cost sharing, which maximizes utilization and reduce all in costs per test. This means that when you use more tests, it's not going to increase the surcharge that we currently have ongoing. Increasing access to devices at site that would otherwise be unreached due to the optimization of device placement across multiple programs. Also, you have improved service delivery. Service delivery quality is improved, which results from increasing and coordinating training and monitoring. When you do training across board for different tests, you don't have to do training for one, then go back and get another. So you have that the quality of service delivery is improved because you have to do the same thing you have to do for EID, you have to do the same thing for TB and for every other test available across board. You have the increasing negotiating power for lower access care. We know that Nigeria has moved to the access care, which is the surcharge model for taking care of the warranty and the maintenance. So for service, you are using the same amount in service that you use for one test as the same amount you use for multiple tests. Multiple disease programs leverage on integrated data management. So for Nigeria, we use GX Alert. And on the GX Alert platform, you are able to see how many HIV tests is being done, although you have quite a number of varying laboratory information system being used, but you can use the same sample transport. If I go to a facility to pick HIV tests, I can also go to pick TB tests. And supply chain systems creates cost savings. So if I need to move cartridges to a site that requires HIV, I could as well move TB cartridges. So we look at the things that are the indices that has impacted GeneXpert network operations. While we have some that you can control as authorized service providers, there are some that are beyond our control and we can do close to nothing about it. Now, which are the non-controllable indices, like the natural disaster? In 2022, Nigeria had flood, and we know that between the north central of Nigeria and the northwest to the south, there's what we call Lokoja is a confluence state, which is in Kogi State. That is where everyone that needs to go by road across Nigeria needs to get to before you take a diversion. Lokoja, being a confluence city, had flooding, and in that flooding, it took over the whole road, so there was traffic lock for everyone coming and trying to reach their destinations. Natural or man-made, when you have communal clashes, there is nothing you can actually do about that. It's better to be safe than sorry, so you need to hide. You have healthcare workers. In terms of healthcare workers, you could have staff attrition. Quite a number of staff when we started 10 years ago, like Jerod had mentioned, that we are just hitting our 10th year. Quite a number of staff that started with us had gotten other jobs. They've gone for greener pastures. And then when the government hospitals go on strike or even the public goes on strike, then you know that the hospitals are not accessible. Most recently in Nigeria, we had industrial action which had everyone seated at home for 2 days. All the airports were shut down. So there's nothing we can do about this. In case of a force majeure, for Nigeria, we have lost about 4 facilities to fire incidents. And then quite a number of times the computers are stolen. In the case of the pandemic or in case of an epidemic, we all were at home and there was nothing we could do about it. So these are non-controllable from the end of the ASP or the manufacturer. Next slide, please. This picture shows the FMCO2. Okay, you can see that from this picture, the whole facility is underwater. And this GeneXpert was a picture taken where the GeneXpert is half in water, the CPU is in water, only the printer is seated on the CPU. We don't know for how long that will last. So the flooding of the roads to these facilities affected the logistics. The spares could not get to the site or to the end users. And then even cartridges being on this road, you'll find out that there is no way anything was able to move. In the case of a fire, these were pictures from different facilities, like from one from the north central, another from the northwest, and another from one of the major labs in Nigeria, which is the reference lab. When they lost everything to fire, there was nothing else that could be done. This was way beyond our control. What are the indices that we could control from our end that impact the operations of GeneXpert? You have temperature and dust. If the weather is too hot, you can turn on your fan to get some air. But in the case of GeneXpert, you have air-conditioned rooms. And then you might not be able to control the dust, but the least you could do is to clean. So we have maintenance sheet that tells you what to do as at when. You increase your preventive maintenance in case there is dust, and in case of high temperatures, you use air conditioning. There is nowhere across Nigeria where we have very low temperatures, except for Plateau State. And even in Plateau State, you still need to turn on the air conditioning sometime. Power availability. As of today, access to power is still very, very poor in Nigeria. So we started out using the UPS, then we went to the inverters with batteries, and then we went to the solar panels. Yes, we have a lot of sun, so we could put it to use. And then the inverters came to replace the generators, which made a lot of noise and they were cost to foiling. When we look at another impact that was controllable for us, were the comprehensive service offering. We started out paying for warranties in Nigeria, which means if you don't have a warranty and you have an issue with the GeneXpert machine, then we cannot fix it. However, the manufacturer Cepheid introduced the access care, which gives access to preventive maintenance. Once it is time for your expert check to be done or calibration, it will be done promptly. Amendment to the SOPs was done, so we don't have to wait for a warranty to trigger replacement. You have technical support and tracking system in place. We have what we call the partners community, where you are able to chat, and you can see it across Nigeria today that we have repairs done in less than 24 hours for majority of the facilities. Spare parts are available and they are decentralized at all levels. So if you tell me you have a faulty machine today in Kano, which is in the northwest of Nigeria, I don't have to run to the logistics to send it. All you need to do is to provide the details of the fault, and then it will be repaired promptly. You have a close follow-up on experts check results for efficient module replacement. So with the partners community, it's very, very interactive. We can see what's going on, we can replace on the spot, and then we can get to know if all issues are resolved on the spot. We offer training. When you have staff attrition, quite a number of the staff need to move. And then you have the super users. We had to create a network of super users where we have end users who are trained to do more and to also do what the majority of what the authorized service providers can do. Additional trainings are needed, and therefore we provide training on the spot. So if you meet an issue, you train. If you're passing by and you see an issue in the facility, you train. If you go through to go and do a replacement and you find an issue, it is expected that training is performed. So training and retraining occurs. In terms of technical operations, we take a look at the errors. We submit the key performance indicators, and the errors is one of the things that we monitor as the ASP. We look at the errors, what kind of errors are generated, and how can we fix these errors. And over time, we have been able to reduce a large number of errors. The breakdown of systems too are looked into. If your system breaks down more often than required, then we might need to take a second look at what is causing the breakdown and fix it. In terms of communication, we have regular meetings. We recall that in the past, we have the SIGAT meetings, the zonal review meetings, and in these meetings, we are able to see what is going on. Presentations from facilities, from implementing partners happens, and then we look at what has happened over time. I recall that before now, we had quite a large number of issues, and it kept going down until this very moment. We have reminders. So we need to set reminders to say, oh, you need to do your maintenance. We call these facilities again and often to remind them. Advocacies, the air conditioning goes bad. We do advocacies to the hospital management to revisit the issue, and most of them are very responsive, depending on how much money it will cost for these repairs. We have WhatsApp communication channels. If you are within the TB program or within the HIV program, you can tell that you are you are on a large number of platforms, where some will be for GeneXpert, some will be for EQA. On these channels and on these WhatsApp channels, you can always communicate, and this is within our control. In 2016, we looked at the kind of issues we had. We had a lot of stock cartridges. People could not import their ADF. That's the assay definition file. Some had corrupted software, the GeneXpert software getting corrupt by using an external USB drive. Power instability was worse. And this is not because it's so much more better, but because we're able to find a backup power plan. You have communication loss errors, quite a number of faulty cartridges. We have sample processing errors. We have errors and invalids. And quite a number of modules came into the country dead on arrival because of mishandling. Next slide, please. This is what our backup power plan looked like. If you recall that in the earlier days, we had generators. And because of fueling cost, I recall that the country came together, and then they looked at how do we go from this fueling cost. Then we went for inverter batteries, which is the picture in the center here. These batteries were heavy, and then they relied also on the national power grid. However, most recently, what we have in Nigeria is the solar power. So this solar panels is able to charge these batteries by collecting sunlight and use it. And we have a lot of sunlight here, so we could as well put it to use. Next slide, please. When you look at dusty computers, imagine opening a computer and a GeneXpert machine and seeing this quantity of dust. And then looking at it from outside, it looks so perfect this way. Because the GeneXpert is not going to be able to tolerate these dusts, we had to remind the end users that you need to clean more often. So, the national program had to come together with the stakeholders to say, why are we having dusty issues? We cannot stop the dust from moving, but we can reduce the quantity of dust that we have on these systems. And this is what was done. Next slide. When we look at the challenges we had per geopolitical zone, you look at the southeastern Nigeria, we're looking at what challenges we had, the time of the year which it peaks and it breaks down, and then what possible solutions that we could profile. In the southeastern Nigeria, there's a sit at home, there is underutilization, and this happens majorly from January to May. When you look at underutilization, somehow from the month of June all the way to the end of the year, you have more utilization going on. This sit at home is not under our control. It's a security challenge. And therefore, we can provide advocacy for more utilization by talking to the QA officers and the program managers. In the south of Nigeria, you have a lot of humidity. So when the dust settles and then the humidity goes in, you have a cloggy look at what the GeneXpert will look like internally, and it will begin to malfunction. We also have HR. Staff attrition is a major here. Because most of the staff at these facilities were government staff, the government does not need your permission to transfer them. So this happens within May to September majorly from what we have seen. So we clean more frequently because of the humidity, and then we work with the government to provide HR. If you transfer staff, just inform us, we'll train the new staff that is coming on board. In the north central Nigeria, you have communal clashes and staff attrition. You have minimal breakdowns all year round. This is around the Abuja, Niger, Nasarawa region. And you have minimal breakdowns all year round. This is also not under our control. And because we have minimal breakdowns, what we do is that we work from the Abuja office with the government to provide HR. In the northwest Nigeria, we have dust and heat. This, I think, has impacted a number of our decisions from November to March. We clean more frequently, we control ambient temperatures, but above all, we ensure that our advocacy is never ending. We advocate for more to clean more, and we remind them to put on their air conditioning. We try to check on with the end users what is going on at every time. In Southwest Nigeria, you have the humidity and the accessories. What do we mean by the accessories? For a sample transport mechanism to work properly, you will need a refrigerator in these facilities. You will need air conditioning. These are part of the accessories. You need internet to be able to upload your data. What do we do? In terms of humidity, you clean more frequently. However, when it comes to the accessories, we rely heavily on the implementing partners we have across board to provide these accessories and ensure that they are functioning well. For the Northeast Nigeria, you have humidity and dust, which happens from November to April. And what we do is to clean more frequently. Just to mention that the time of the year helps KNCV to allocate appropriately what our maintenance activities will be. So we'll move our arsenal across. If the Northwest is going to have more breakdowns within a particular time in the year, we ensure that most of our hands-on staff and our super users are concentrated around that region to make things work. What are the solutions that has worked well for us? From inverters, the inverters came to replace the generators. The generator was good, but then fueling was an issue. When the inverters came to be, it replaced the generators, and I think that this is we hit a major milestone while having the inverters in place. We modified the SOPs that we had. If you have been to the GeneXpert labs in Nigeria, I'm sure you are familiar with this top right photo. And this photo is the GeneXpert preventive maintenance phone. So we had to modify these for those facilities that had high humidity, dust, cold. We had to modify to look at the situation in the lab. The introduction of access care, which took away the payment of warranty, was a huge plus for us. We have technical support. You only needed to call the technical officer within the region and even any of our super users, and then you are able to get a solution. Some of them don't even call you back when the issues are resolved. That tells you that you've done something right. We have the sales force, which is a partners community. In the past, we'll keep our data on Excel. However, the partners community is a communicative tool and it's hands-on and immediate. So you drop in a case and the next 10 to 20 minutes, you have a response. And if there's an allocation done, we have the logistics team which moves it and a replacement is done within 24 to 48 hours. Training and retraining. It's not enough to train for the first time. In case of staff attrition or a staff leaves for a better position or the government transfers the staff, you need to retrain. And for those that have been moved to facilities where they were using GeneXpert, they no longer have a GeneXpert. When they come back, recall that we were using the MTB Reef, and now we have the MTB Reef Ultra. If you were moved in between these two periods, you might need a retraining. So retraining is something that we do more often. Once you find yourself in the facility, you search for gaps, and then you do a retraining. Super users, we train them constantly. If we have new information, we ensure that our super users are up to date and constant training is given to them. Advocacies, if you are in a facility and you are an implementing partner or you are from the authorized service provision team or from the national TB program, provide advocacy. Some things that get spoiled in the ACs are less than $1 and they can be fixed. And the facility is just worried about the cost. You might need to do advocacy to the hospital management and they will in turn find out what is going on and see how they can repair this. We decentralized available spare parts. So we have spare parts in every state in the country in Nigeria. All you need to do is tell us that this machine is faulty, and then we begin to fix. A replacement will be gotten across and done speedily. Insurance, in terms of fire, we found out that facilities that had an insurance got a replacement, maybe not of everything, but for a good number of items that were insured, they got a replacement. And then the public-private mix, because we knew that most of the government hospitals would go on strike, the PPM came as a good solution to that. Next slide, please. This picture here is showing what we have done with training. When COVID came around, recall that they could use the number of these machines, but we needed to train again. For pictures here, this is inside the wild truck where you have the laboratory staff wearing a yellow lab coat. The lower middle photo is showing you that in the wild truck, they were able to do diagnosis for COVID. That's because we provided training. And among the training you provide is to ensure that they can also fix the machine on the go, except they need a part that is not readily available at their hands, which we are available to provide in 24 hours. Next slide, please. So what did we do in terms of stakeholders collaboration? KNCV formed the CGAT, the Country GeneXpert Advisory Team. Remember that it's people hear CGAT and they think it's a meeting most of the time, but it is a team. And the CGAT had a mandate to ensure the proper implementation and the use of GeneXpert technology. This body was responsible for addressing all the challenges for use, and they ensured that solutions were practical and achievable. So I recall attending one CGAT meeting where we were told, oh, the machines are faulty, there is heat, there's this. And we made a lot of suggestions, but it was the body, CGAT, that came together to say, can we use generator and provide fueling? And this was taken back to the funders and it was approved. It was also the CGAT that made a suggestion on the transition between using UPS to generators and then to solar. So this was not a decision made. We saw the problems, we had we knew where the problems were, but when we bring it to the CGAT, they ensure that there are solutions that are practical and achievable. This CGAT body consists of programs, implementing partners, public and private customers that own a GeneXpert instrument. The programs include the NTBLCP, the NASCAP, NACA, and most recently NICRAT, and quite a number of programs that have been integrated into the use of GeneXpert. We have funders like the CDC, the USAID, UNITAID, UNICEF, Global Fund. Meetings are held quarterly when possible. When we had quite a large number of problems, we would hold meetings quarterly. But as the problem reduced, it went to biannual, sometimes annual. And if there are things that need to be discussed as an emergency, the CGAT meeting is called. All issues around the use of GeneXpert are deliberated on by the CGAT team. What's the functionality of the GeneXpert network? It's a shared responsibility. If you look at this, you'll find out that if you're an implementing partner, you have a say here, and it's together that we were able to resolve most of this issue. KNCV came in as the authorized service provider. We have implementing partners. We have donors. We have the technical partners who will do a research and see that it is better to do things this way rather than the other. We have the private sector too. We had to bring them on board. And you have Cepheid, which is the manufacturer. You'll see that we have the NTBLCP and the Ministry of Health in the middle, which is this national and subnational. This includes the state. So from the national to the states, the program managers, they all fall within the NTBLCP and the MOH network. So this is actually a shared responsibility.
So in conclusion, we wanted to, as you're aware, note that GeneXpert is a powerful diagnostic tool within the public health space in Nigeria, and especially with integration. And as Prisca noted, they were able to use it to supplement testing, which was in short supply in Nigeria for the COVID pandemic, and had service and support with comprehensive service deployed in Nigeria, as well as renewed education that has led to overcome many of the challenges that are controllable. There are still other challenges, and it's a very dynamic project where the team responds to any new challenges, and the challenges, as Prisca mentioned, change over time. They fix something and then something else comes up. So that's quite dynamic. But they have the pulse, they keep their hand on the pulse, so to speak, of the project to make sure things are moving. To successfully operate the GeneXpert, innovative mitigation plans are necessary. And collaboration with programs and ministries of health is extremely important to achieve success. Without the partnerships, any break in that chain leads to disruptions in our 10-year experience. So the partnerships are key. Are there any other questions? I saw that there was a question about how we deal with, for instance, the northeast of the country. And I think we do sometimes repairs and trainings by having people leave areas of conflict. So that's one method that we utilize. But there are places where in some parts of the country where the health services the clinics actually are non-functional. They're destroyed, and the workers don't go there. So that's kind of an uncontrollable situation unless we have mobile units, and sometimes those in some situations might be attacked because they look like they're valuable. So there are issues like that there aren't magical solutions, but we try to work around them. But safety of the staff is of the highest importance. So one question is, does KNCV use a third party as a service provider? Or is it KNCV staff? It's actually KNCV staff is the service provider. We moved, as I mentioned, from 3 staff at the beginning, and in 2014, now we have 13 staff placed throughout the country, and then they're also supported by the super users and, of course, all the partners to keep things running. There was one question about, is it possible to see the impact of service provision on testing unsuccessful, including of functional modules? We actually have key performance indicators, various ones that look at error rate, for instance, and the error rate is below 5% consistently for quite some time. One challenge that we have is the module swap is the only key performance indicator where we're still not meeting the 95% target of having it done within 2 weeks. And that has to do with what we alluded to before about challenging environments where it's not safe or there are floods or the like. So we have it almost 80%. Are changed within 2 weeks. So there's another question: how is access utilization and GeneXpert machines measured, and the trend in the country? What is the machine downtime and module replacement rates? The downtime, and Prisca, you can correct me, is within the key performance indicator. It's achieved in terms of not having machines down for a prolonged period of time, thanks to all these things that Prisca mentioned, having spare parts, having the super users, the increased staff. So there's one question that I'm going to revert to Prisca. She might be able to answer about the cost comparisons between inverters and solar panels. Of course, solar panels are renewable energy, but there is an investment cost. Do you think you might be able to answer that, Prisca?
Yes, thank you very much, Jerod. Yes, the cost of fueling was much more higher in comparison to the cost of the solar. So because solars are renewable energy, like Jerod had mentioned, and but you have an initial cost which could be quite heavy.
Yes. Okay. And I saw that there was one question about risk mitigation plan.
Yes.
I just went to Nigeria. I go annually, and one thing that we were trying to do to get the key performance indicator to 95% for modular replacement was to see if there is any way to tweak that to improve it while maintaining safety. And what we concluded is we are going to update our security plan with professional help, so an outside person that has expertise, and we have access to US aid is closely aligned with a project that we have in country, also the Nigerian KNCV office. And in each region, each state, there's a dedicated security person that does an assessment every week, I believe. And we can tune into that. Another thing that we're thinking of doing along with the GeneXpert or the GX alert is to have an alert system that like there's an automated SMS already to providers and the NTP when there's a DRTB patient diagnosed. So we are thinking of also having an SMS for when there is an instrument that's offline. And that would be a red alert if it's offline and not doing any test, and it would be an orange alert if it's offline but still doing test. Prisca, they are asking how often you are doing trainings, and I think that you're doing trainings a lot, various trainings, but maybe you can answer that, please.
So at the inception of the project, we would have the corporate trainings where we call everyone together to have a general training. However, as the machines increased, what we do now is the on-the-bench mentoring and training. So we look for the gaps and we fix it. And in fixing that gap, we are also available to provide a complete training at the facilities. So for this year, if I look at what I have as on the site training, we already have about 110. That's an approximate figure on the branch training. So if we notice that you have an error that is constantly present with you, what we do is to come to your facility, investigate, and then provide a retraining all over again. And this training is not going to be for only the person using the GeneXpert, but for everyone that works in the GeneXpert lab or who has intention of being in there. So for corporate trainings, we are yet to agree on the dates, and we'll be working with the National TB program to ensure that this is done. Thank you. Over to you, Jerod.
Yes, there is a question about how many out of the 546 GeneXperts are reporting data on a daily basis. We look at that. We have a staff person seconded to sit in the NTP and analyze the GX alert data and report back to the project on a weekly basis. And in general, about 50 to 75% of the expert machines are reporting on a daily basis. In terms of the ecosystem, that's a good question in terms of sustainability. Well, one good thing is that the cost has gone down for GeneXpert for the cartridges. But another thing that's key to the sustainability, which we mentioned, is the integration, because then the cost goes down for all those things that, that Prisca mentioned. There's a question about the networking and specimen transport system, how it's organized. I want to note that we also have a courier system where we deliver, and our project pays a courier to move things throughout the country, and I believe even into the Northeast in some difficult areas. And Prisca can elaborate on that. In terms of the network system, the transport system, that is run by the national authorities, as far as I understand, and it's paired where possible with integrated transport. So like the HIV, hepatitis, and the TB testing would all be transported at the same time for cost efficiency. Some of those tests are for monitoring and some of them are for diagnostics. And it's really important that the diagnostics take priority because, of course, these are life-threatening diseases that need immediate attention. Prisca, do you want to elaborate anything about the transportation system?
Yes, thank you, Jerod. So for the transport system, we know that it's done by and it's handled by the National TB Program and the implementing partners. So we know that this is done by the third-party logistics, which is a contractor. They are contractors to the National TB Program, and also we have a national body that does transport for the HIV program. So depending on where and what kind of sample is being moved, sample transport depends on who who the vendor for that contract is. And like I said, it's usually the third party logistics. We have quite a number of people also moving. We used to have riders for health. So it has also evolved. And this is a whole lot to look at. Thank you very much, Jerod. And over to you.
Yes. So thank you very much for your participation. And we wish you a wonderful morning, afternoon, and evening.